This is Regained Wellness Podcast with Jamie Logie, episode 153, The Health Benefits of Coconut Oil. Hey guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Jamie Logie. I run regainedwellness.com, and this is the Regained Wellness Podcast. And delayed a little bit. I mean, it doesn't matter because you're listening to this in real time whenever you listen to it, but delayed a little bit by HQ Trivia, which just popped up on my phone as I was going into the show. Have you played HQ Trivia? This is the most addicting thing in the world. And it's like every time you get that notification, it's like Christmas coming up. So even though there's no delay on your end, that's what I was doing before. So this show is on what you hear the term superfood thrown around a lot, and it's, I don't know, probably not the most necessary correct thing and just used more in a marketing sense of anything. But coconut oil, if it's something you haven't used or not aware of or do and you're not sure why, it's one of the legit true superfoods. It's incredible what this stuff can do and how healthy it is and the benefits it provides. So I'll be looking at today in the show what it is, how it's made, and then best ways to use it and all the health benefits that come from it. So before all that, here's the obligatory subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Hopefully I don't sound like a robot every time I do this, but if you do subscribe, that makes sure the shows are automatically sent to you to your listening device of choice, whatever it may be, iPhone, Android, whatever. So anywhere where you get podcasts, I should be there, like the Jackson 5, and make sure you subscribe. Okay, let's get into this. So what I'm going to start with is how this stuff is made and where it comes from, obviously from coconut. So coconut oil are actually called as well copra oil. It's the edible oil extracted from like the meat, like the inside white meat of mature coconuts. So harvested from coconut palms. So it's got a very high saturated fat content and it's slow to oxidize because of that. So it's really resistant to rancidification. That's a good word, rancidification. It doesn't go rancid, and that's the problem with a lot of vegetable-based oils. They have that more polyunsaturated, various forms of fat, not that legitimate. So, I mean, these are chemical created things, though, like the vegetable oils and the soy oils and the canola oils. And one of the big things is they go rancid very easy. And it's been seen that a lot of times there are deodorizers added into those things to protect from the smell that is potentially happening from them going rancid. So just another reason to avoid any sort of vegetable oil. So because of this, coconut oil can last a good 6 months at even relatively warm temperatures, up to like 24 degrees Celsius, 75 degrees Fahrenheit without spoiling. So pretty amazing stuff as far as that. So how it's done is there's a dry process and a wet process to it. So the dry processing requires that the meat be extracted from the shell and dried using fire, sunlight, kilns, more of a traditional way to do it. And it's then pressed, it's dissolved with solvents, and it produces the coconut oil and also like a high protein, high fiber mash that is not really good for human consumption, but they'll feed it to a lot of cattle and animals and stuff like that. So then the wet process is it uses the raw coconut rather than the dried from the dry process. And the protein in the coconut creates like an emulsion of oil and water. And then the next step is breaking up the emulsion to recover the oil. And it can be done by boiling, but it's, it can make a sort of discolored oil and not as economical. And the modern techniques they use like centrifuges and stuff like that and pre-treatments that have like cold heat, acids, different salts, enzymes, steam distillation, all sorts of combinations like that. And this process it's a little less viable. It only gets around a 10 to 15% lower yield. So close, but not as good as the dry way of harvesting it. So virgin coconut oil, which is, one of the better forms and that you'd find in the stores, it can be produced from fresh coconut milk, from the meat, or even from the residues. So producing it from the fresh meat involves either doing that wet milling I mentioned, or drying the residue and then using what they call a screw press to extract the oil. So the virgin coconut oil can also be extracted from fresh meat by they grate it and then dry it to down to a moisture content of around 10 and 12%, and then using a manual press that helps to extract the oil after that drying process. So producing it from coconut milk involves grating the coconut and mixing with water and then squeezing out the oil. The milk can also be fermented for up to 48 hours, then the oil removed and the cream heated to remove any of the remaining oil. And then there's a third option, involves using a centrifuge again to separate the oil from the other liquids. So coconut oil can also be extracted from the dry residue left over from the production of coconut milk. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, especially with the virgin coconut oil. So it takes quite a lot to do this. So 1,000 mature coconuts that would weigh in at around 1,400 kilograms or just over 3,000 pounds. That'll yield around 170 kilograms or 370 pounds of the copra, or the natural form, and from which around 70 liters of coconut oil can be extracted. So it's a long process. There's various forms to do it. There's traditional ways, there's modern mechanical ways, and it takes quite a lot to get it down to how you would find it. So in case you haven't used coconut oil or whatever, generally when you buy it, it tends to be in, like, you can find in glass jars or more like of a plastic sort of casing to it that's sort of a little thicker, and it's got an interesting consistency. So I mean, it's like a super thick, I don't even know what to compare it to, like a super thick like mayonnaise, but at a warmer room temperature it can turn to liquid if it gets over that, like 24 degrees. But generally it's more of that solid, and almost like looks like a hard paste or whatever that you can scrape off. But it's this, like, more of this solid structure to it, and its ability to not be as oxidative, that makes it probably one of the best things to cook with because of its natural structure. It's able to handle a lot higher heats than most anything, more than olive oil, canola oils, whatever. It can handle quite a lot of temperature. So it's your best thing if you're doing any like form of frying or high sautéing, which ideally you don't want to do with an olive oil. It doesn't have as high what they call a smoke point. So if you're cooking at whatever sort of a higher temperature and you've got oil in the pan, if it starts smoking, I mean, be careful, but stop cooking and get rid of it, because once it hits that smoke point, that's when it starts to basically go rancid in the pan and break down. And vegetable oils especially, which I just don't think are good to cook with at all, they don't have a high smoke point and they're bad enough already, let alone when they get to that extreme place. And then olive oil, it can go pretty bad once it's overheated. But coconut oil can go pretty high and handle quite a bit. So why use this stuff? What are the health benefits? Why is it considered a superfood? So a lot of this info is from a lot of good research from healthline.com and also through Authority Nutrition, like hands down the best, I think, resources for information and research-based nutrition info that you can find out there. So it's coconut oil has got this unique combination of fatty acids, and fatty acids, I mean, people can understandably be afraid of fat, but in this situation, it's a different combination of fatty acids that have positive health effects, including fat loss, better brain function, various other benefits. So I'll start going through the different benefits people are seeing, or the research is showing from it. So coconut oil contains the fatty acids I mentioned, but with really potent medical properties. It's different in a lot of the other, even as good as like olive oil is, it's different in its form of fat. And these fats that you find in coconut oil can boost fat burning in your body and also provide your body and brain with quick energy. And they're also just seen to raise that good HDL cholesterol in your blood, and that is linked to reduced heart disease. And when we look at fats in the diet, most fats in the diet are called long-chain triglycerides. obviously a longer combination of the fatty acid chains, but the fats in coconut oil are known as medium chain triglycerides, MCTs. So you might have seen like MCT oil in supplement stores and stuff like that. Basically what that means is that the fatty acids are shorter than most other fats. So when you eat these types of fats, they go straight to the liver. They bypass everything else. They go straight to the liver, which means they're used as quick sources of energy and turned into ketones. And I did a whole episode on the ketogenic diet and ketosis if you want to check that out. I'll link that in the show notes today if you want to see it. So today is regainedwellness.com/153. And you can see any like this information or the other shows and stuff like that. So the ketones have really powerful benefits for the brain, and they've been, just a quick summary, like the idea with ketosis or a ketogenic diet was originally studied as a treatment for epilepsy, Alzheimer's, other conditions like that. And people who go on the ketogenic diet today are doing it just for some of the cognitive functions and the neuroprotective factors that come from these things, like, you know, the ketones in the case found in medium chain triglycerides, like they are in coconut oil. So the next big benefit, and one of the things people like to point out a lot, is that the populations that eat a lot of coconut oil are healthy. I don't know what it is, people hate coconut. You know, if there's ever like a chocolate bar, like, oh no, it's got coconut in it, forget it. I love coconut. I love anything with shredded coconut. I don't know why that's become such a hated thing, but the populations that eat a lot are healthy, and we don't eat a lot over here. It's still, I don't know, people consider it sort of an exotic food in the Western world, and the only people that seem to eat it are health conscious. But in other parts of the world, coconut, straight up coconut, is a dietary staple. I spent a lot of time in Brazil and in South America, and you would just go up trees and get these and cut them, like take them down and cut them open and drink them right out. And guys would sell them on the beach. They'd carry them around in coolers. They'd hack them open and you just chug them right back and stuff like that. It's just a dietary staple, and people have had them and thrived on them for generations. So especially a lot of the people in the South Pacific, and it's seen that people in different populations in South Pacific, they used to eat over 60% of their calories from coconuts. And, you know, when they look at these people, they're found to be in excellent health, very low rates of heart disease. Obviously, they're not eating modern Western foods. Maybe some are, but in general, they're not eating a lot of processed and manufactured crap. And there's a lot of different, there is, what are some of the different populations seen? One's called the Kitavans. They've seen also to be in excellent health. The Takaloans, I don't know if anyone's watched Jonah from Tonga, from Summer Heights High, Jonah Takalua. I think this is a whole different one. The Takalauans, that's another South Pacific population. Basically, you know, they've been eating this for generations and generations and having really good health. So one of the next big benefits, and like I mentioned before, is that coconut oil has that ability to increase fat burning. And that's probably going to be a lot of people's big draw to it. And, you know, some people think of obesity as just a matter of calories, and that's a whole big topic. But it's the source of those calories that are important. And it's just a fact that different foods affect our bodies and our hormones in different ways. And a calorie is not always a calorie. There, you know, calories from a glass of Coke are going to hit your body a lot different than a handful of almonds. There's just different effects. Some are a little more gentle on the body, and some have hormonal impacts. The medium chain triglycerides, those MCTs in coconut oil, can increase how many calories you burn compared to the same amount of calories from those longer chain fatty acids from just a regular fat. And that's pretty promising if you're wanting to, lower body fat and not have to be worried about counting every single calorie and stuff like that. There's one study that found that 15 to 30 grams of the medium chain triglycerides per day increased 24-hour energy expenditure by 5%, totaling about 120 calories per day, just from that little bit. And it doesn't mean you want to go overboard with it, but it's just funny that you don't think of a fat as having that effect in the body, but it is burning body fat. It's causing energy expenditure, and you're not even have to do anything. You don't even have to move. That's how interesting and and really amazing coconut oil can be. Okay, next big benefit is coconut oil can kill harmful microorganisms. Organisms, easy for me to say. If you heard that, it means I didn't want to edit it out, and you can hear my foibles along the way. And this is one I was not aware of, and that one of the acids that makes up the fatty acids in coconut oil is called lauric acid, and it makes up about 50% of the fatty acids in coconut oil. And when this lauric acid is digested, it creates another substance in the body called monolaurin. And both the lauric acid is an amazing thing. I'll have to do a whole show just on that. And I don't know if people find that boring, but just the lauric acid and the monolaurin can kill harmful pathogens like bacteria, viruses, fungi. Pretty amazing. So just an example, these substances have been shown to help kill that staph infection bacteria of what do they call it? Staphylococcus aureus, or like a super dangerous pathogen. And it's also been shown to kill off yeast strains like Candida albicans, and that's one of the more common sources of yeast infections in humans. So I did not know this. So it's not, I mean, it's not directly the medium chain triglycerides and the coconut oil, but the lauric acid that makes up half of the fatty acids in it. So amazing that it can kill bacteria and yeast in the body. The next benefit, coconut oil can reduce your hunger, helping you eat less. And that's another, again, interesting benefit, if people are looking for weight loss, not just the fact that it can physically help you lose weight and burn calories, the very substance of itself, but on the same hand, it's also going to reduce your hunger. So you get kind of like a double whammy effect. And it may be related, again, this is the research off healthline.com, this may be related to the way the fats are metabolized. And again, going back to that ketone issue, and that because ketones just in themselves have an appetite reducing effect, and they've been observed to do that. And along with the cognitive function, more the mental clarity, things like that, it's just got an appetite reducing effect. And so there's one study, varying amounts of medium and long chain triglycerides were fed to 6 healthy men. The men eating the most medium chain triglycerides ate 256 fewer calories per day on average. Interesting. It's got this like log on the fire, slow burn effect where you're just more stable. Your blood sugar levels are more controlled. You're just not hungry. And that's compared to, normal forms of fat. And then there's another study, and you got 14 healthy men here, and they discovered, in the study, 14 healthy men discovered that those who ate the most medium chain triglycerides at breakfast ate fewer calories at lunch. And that's a good tip, that your breakfast should be more, I'd say, protein and fat based, as opposed, you always think about like having to have carbohydrates and energy and stuff like that, which, if you're going from your house right to sitting at a desk all day, you probably don't need a huge, like massive bowls of oatmeal and granola and cereals, because you're probably not going to be burning that off. The other problem is earlier in the morning, you just from your natural, you have like natural cortisol levels through the day, and when you wake up, and they can be a little more peaked, and when you eat, it can have more of a spike in blood sugar, especially if you're eating more starchy based foods, which is going to result in more of a bigger crash later compared to other points in the day. And then when these crashes happen, not only is it, you're irritable, you can be lethargic, you can be, your mental clarity is not good, you're also hungrier again. And that's why a lot of people complain that they have breakfast, but they're starving 2 hours later. And it's probably because of their food choices. If you're eating a bowl of Special K or some oatmeal and toast with jam, you're basically having a sugar rush first thing in the morning, which is not a good time to have it, again, when your blood sugar is a little more susceptible to being spiked just in general, let alone all that food you're throwing on it. And a lot of people's breakfasts resemble dessert, like pastries or donuts wherever you have them, or again, like regular cereals and orange juices. And it's just that sugar blast where you're probably better off having a little more of that slower burning, easier on the insulin and the blood sugar, fats and proteins. So something like if you do eggs or some egg whites sauteed with, some spinach and, cooked in a little bit, you can make your own like omelet, throw in a ton of like mushrooms and peppers and onions and garlic, saute it and cook it in the coconut oil. And then you've got an amazing combination of the good, satiating proteins and fats with all the nutrients, vitamins, minerals, and the medium chain triglycerides from the coconut oil, which are going to keep you a little more satiated and full for a longer period. And you're less likely you're going to be starving at like 10:30 in the morning and go for the danishes or donuts or whatnot. So interesting though, just like having it at breakfast, I'd say that's a good recommendation. So these studies were small and only done for short periods of time. I get that. If this effect, if that's over the long term, and, it looks like it is as they start to do more and more research and stuff like that, it could be a good tool in reducing body weight and stuff like that over the long term. So the next benefit goes back to that issue of the benefits that come from people who have epilepsy, and that the fatty acids in the coconuts may reduce seizures. And it goes back to the ketogenic issue and following, very low carb, very high fat diet, and how that has been studied to treat various disorders. And the best known therapeutic, application of this diet is treating, if you hadn't seen this before, is treating drug-resistant epilepsy in children and in young adults. And this goes back to the 1920s. And I don't know how through study and through looking at how the brain works and ketone bodies and in the brain and the usage, but along the way they just found that was a big reduction, almost in half, I believe, of the amount of seizures and stuff like that. So when you're eating a ketogenic diet, it involves eating very few carbohydrates, large amounts of fat, and it leads to those higher amounts of the ketones in the blood. And it just, for some reason, it dramatically reduced the rates of seizures, specifically in children. And even in those who haven't had success with multiple different types of drugs. And it just sort of evolved over the years. And basically, because the fatty acids in coconut oil like I mentioned, get shipped right to the liver and turned into ketones, they're just often used in epileptic patients to induce ketosis and, help reduce the seizures. And it also can allow for a bit more carbs in the diet and stuff like that. So just interesting that something, just a normal substance like this simple coconut oil with these medium chain triglycerides had this, dramatic effect. So the next benefit, and this is on how coconut oil can raise the good HDL cholesterol. And cholesterol is a whole minefield of a topic, and I won't go too much into it. And, coconut oil contains natural saturated fats, and these are the type that can increase that good HDL cholesterol in your body. And HDL cholesterol, it's not technically cholesterol, they're lipoproteins, they're carrier proteins, but it still can be related. And the saturated fat seems to increase them, and they may also help turn the bad LDL cholesterol, which I'm sure you've heard of, into a less harmful form. And there's small dense LDL particles and large fluffy LDL particles, and the large fluffy ones can actually be seen as beneficial, but sometimes cholesterol tests can just show an overall count, and it can potentially be high, even though a lot of them can be of this higher, fluffier type molecules. It's the small dense ones that are bad, but like I said, a big whole issue there. But by increasing HDL cholesterol, many experts believe that coconut oil could be good for heart health compared to many other fats. And there's still, some warnings and issues because it is a very high fat source substance and a lot higher than, say, something like hemp seed butter or whatever, or different variations. It's very high in the saturated fat, but it may be something that will be recommended for heart health a little more as it's, a little more awareness and study goes into it. So here's one study. In 40 women, coconut oil reduced total and LDL cholesterol while increasing HDL compared to soybean oil. There's another example of a fat, or sorry, an oil that's not as high or doesn't have that saturated fat content that coconut oil with. Then here's another study. This is in 116 patients, and it showed that a dietary program that included coconut oil raised levels of the good HDL cholesterol. So, interesting, promising. Probably needs more and more time. These are, relatively, again, smaller sample sizes, but, encouraging. Okay, next benefit oil. And this, probably a lot of people are aware of this, but coconut oil can protect your skin, hair, and even your dental health. And that might be news to people. So it doesn't have to just be eating it. It can have a topical usage, and it's used for cosmetic purposes, improves the health and appearance of the skin, the hair. There's studies on individuals with dry skin that show that coconut oil can improve the moisture content of your skin. It can also reduce symptoms of eczema or eczema, depending on how you like to pronounce it. Coconut oil can also be protective against hair damage, and there's one study that shows effectiveness as a weak sunscreen, which is interesting, and it can block out around 20% of the sun's ultraviolet rays. Again, very interesting. There's another, I don't know if you've heard of oil pulling before. I've never tried this, and I still want to. It's a different application of it. It's like using a mouthwash, and it basically involves swishing or, kind of rinsing around in your mouth, which they call oil pulling, and that can kill some of the harmful bacteria in your mouth, improve dental health, reduce bad breath. I know people do this all the time and swear by it, so maybe I'll try that tonight, actually, if that's too much information, but I'm interested to see what that's like. Okay. Next benefit, back to the fatty acids in the coconut oil and how it pertains to brain function, how it's able to boost brain function in people that have Alzheimer's. So it's, Alzheimer's, that's the most common cause of dementia worldwide. Obviously the elderly population are most susceptible. In Alzheimer's patients, there appears to be a reduced ability to use glucose for energy in certain parts of the brain. And that's interesting. And the researchers have speculated that ketones can provide an alternate energy source for these malfunctioning brain cells and reduce symptoms of Alzheimer's. And your brain uses ketones well. And if you're low in, these good omega-3s or good medium chain triglycerides, saturated fat, it's not ideal for brain health because your brain is made of fat. A large majority of the dry weight of the brain, the actual structure, is made up of like these omega-3 fatty acids and other types of saturated fat. And when you have a diet that's, say, too high in sugar and refined carbohydrates and stuff, it can lead to cognitive issues. And there's, some insights that a lot of people that suffer from depression is because they have low levels of omega-3 and they're not getting this good intake, whether they're just avoiding animal products or they're just not exposure to the omega-3s or those good saturated fats, or they're just like trying to avoid them like the plague. Not that it's always, 100% of a causation, but just interesting that the research is showing that the ketones that come from the fats are that good energy source that the brain will take and help reduce those symptoms of the Alzheimer's. So this is a study from 2006. And in this one, consumption of medium chain triglycerides led to improvement in brain function in patients with milder forms of Alzheimer's. So it's definitely not saying that coconut oil is going to specifically help or stop or whatever. And it's still very early research, but we're understanding the importance of, what healthy fats can do as far as it comes to brain function. Okay, next, let's start wrapping it up here. And one of the last benefits here that I found is that coconut oil can not only help you lose fat, like we talked about with the lower, being used as an energy source and, going right to the liver and causing your body to burn more calories, but the fat it can help you lose is specifically some of that abdominal fat, which is the most harmful fat. And, fat stores in different places on the body, but the fat that's in your midsection is a lot different than, say, the fat that's on the back of your arm. It's a little more hormonal and can cause different issues in the body. And it's, obviously the more there, the more you're looking at potential connections with heart disease and high blood pressure and whatnot. And it's just a different type of fat compared to, like, say, the fat on the back of your calf or whatever, which is just more of an aesthetic thing. The abdominal fat is a real potential health harming type of fat. And so given that coconut oil can, like I said, reduce the appetite, increase fat burning, it makes sense that it can help you lose weight. And coconut oil appears to be especially effective at reducing that belly fat. And, not only is it maybe not the most, again, aesthetically pleasing, but it, like I said, it's that different type of fat. It lodges in the abdominal cavity and also around the organs. And it's just the type of fat that's associated with all the things we worry about: heart disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, all the chronic Western diseases. It's because of this abdominal belly fat. So here's a study of 40 women with abdominal obesity, and they were supplemented with 30 milliliters, around 2 tablespoons of coconut oil per day. And this led to a significant reduction in both their body mass index and waist circumference over a period of 12 weeks. And then another study in 20 obese males noted a reduction in that waist circumference of around 1.1 inches, which is about 2.8 centimeters, after 4 weeks of 30 milliliters, at 2 tablespoons of coconut oil per day. So interesting stuff that it's not just helping you eat less and keeping you full, it's also burning calories, and it's targeting specifically that abdominal fat. So then how much? And then this is important to note here, because obviously, coconut oil is still high in calories, so you don't want to add a ton of it to your diet. But I think how it works best is when you use it to replace those other cooking fats or butter or whatever. Or, like I said, the olive oil, which you want to be careful of cooking at high temperatures. Olive oil does a little bit better as sort of maybe like a marinade or to drizzle on over after, to make your own salad dressings when it's kept a little cool. So it's not just about adding a ton of it, but replacing those other things, like especially like soybean oil, canola oil, vegetable oil. I'd get those out right away and use the coconut oil instead. So ideally, it looks like around 1 tablespoon per day is good. And I'd maybe, if you haven't been using it before, take a couple weeks to have that, maybe 1 a day. And then you could go up to, it looks like 2 tablespoons a day at the most is going to be sufficient to achieve health benefits. But again, like I said, work up to that, because it is a kind of a real saturated fat to the body, or shot of saturated fat to the body, where you might not have been having that amount of intake of it. So again, it's something like I'm not saying to go and start using it immediately, but it does seem to have a lot of possible health benefits. I talk to your doctor first if you're a little concerned about taking in more saturated fat, or if you've been trying to avoid it. Just, have a talk and run it by, and hopefully they would say the same thing too. Like if you're, get rid of all those other oils and use the coconut oil instead, and it might have a good place. But it looks like the experts recommend to start at just a teaspoon a day and use it in replace of those other things, and just have that little bit up for the 1 to 2 weeks before going up a little bit more. But again, if you're concerned or the cholesterol issues or whatnot, definitely talk to the doctor first and see if this would have a place or not in your whole diet. But it's very interesting, all the what's seen as possible health benefits reported and studied and researched. And again, still sort of early days on it. And again, like I'll always say, keep doing your own research, see what else is out there. Use this as sort of a jumping off point. And I can link up more of those different studies and the resources I used here if you go to the show notes. So regainedwellness.com/153, and I can put the article up and all those different sources and stuff. And, continue to do your own information. Health, there's no other way around it. It takes work. Nutrition, fitness, wellness, it takes work because you've got to educate yourself as best as possible. You can't just go into things willy-nilly and whatever. You have to be a little more disciplined and inform yourself as best as possible because there's so much information out there. So you have to start piecing it together, not just have like quick jumps to conclusion, but, like I said, take in this information, see that there's, some positive perceptions of it and possible hope behind it being good, but continue to learn more and look more into it. And there's a ton of information always available. So just a show, I thought that would be interesting because it's, this one simple substance that has all these amazing connections to it, from, the heart health to the weight loss to the cognitive function to the skin health. Pretty amazing in just one little substance. So hopefully you find that as interesting as I do and didn't mind spending 36 minutes and 34 seconds up to this point talking about coconut oil. But if you have any more questions on it or other things you want to see covered in the show, anything in general, just write to me at info@regainedwellness.com. I'll be sure to check it, can get back to you, everything like that. In the meantime, thank you for listening. I do appreciate it. I know there's a lot of shows out there right now on all sorts of health-related topics. So just the fact you're listening to this one, I appreciate it a lot. But that's it for today, and I'll see you soon. Bye.